Naval combat. There are few things more awe-inspiring than watching ships go head-to-head with one another. Battleships firing their cannons, cruisers providing air support, while submarines hunt from below the depths. Naval combat is amazing, and I have spent countless hours on YouTube watching documentaries about how these behemoths of steel clashed with one another in epic battles across the sea. Throughout history, however, ships have also been extremely costly to produce, to the point where armies have been so scared of losing them that they sometimes won't even deploy their ships in battle. Advanced Wars has sadly taken this aspect of naval combat a little too literally, resulting in naval units being some of the most expensive in the game. This would be okay if these units were key to winning battles, but sadly, this is rarely the case. Unless you're literally being forced to use them, naval units are just incredibly overpriced for what they do. While the upcoming reboot camp probably won't do much to fix this, I still feel like it would make for an interesting video. So today we ask the question, how do we balance naval units in Advanced Wars? Now, before we start, I want to mention that this video will be primarily focused on Advanced Wars 2, because that will be most relevant once the reboot camp launches. Dual Strike did add a few extra ships like the Black Boat and the Carrier, but while the Black Boat certainly was a great support unit, it didn't do anything to revitalize naval combat, and the Carrier was just too damn expensive. Days of Ruin added a brand new version of the Carrier that could actually produce a unique unit, the Seaplane, as well as battleships that could move and fire in the same turn. But naval units still remained incredibly costly, making them situational at best. I think one of the biggest issues with naval combat in general is that it will only be relevant if the map is specifically made for it. After all, ships can only move on water, so if there is no water, there won't be a need for ships. A really limiting factor in Advanced Wars 1 and 2, however, is that most ships can't even cross shoals or bridges, making their mobility extremely limited. Both of these issues were actually corrected in Days of Ruin, which allowed naval units not only to traverse shoals, but also bridges, allowing for maps that made naval units extremely essential. The only slight problem with this change is that some players might feel it a bit silly that a dived sub can stop a tank from crossing a bridge, but the same could be said for a fighter trapping itself on a battleship, and that's already in the game, so I think this is a compromise we can live with. Another issue with naval combat is that there needs to be a reason to fight in the ocean. Wargroove actually had a terrific idea in this regard by adding special naval infantry that could capture naval exclusive properties. This immediately gave both players a reason to contest the sea, which made every other naval unit better as a result. Now, you can of course just have islands with properties on them, but what stops players from just utilizing transport copters to capture them with infantry? The only situation where naval-supported island warfare becomes a reality is if the map lacks airports altogether, and this is not very common. However, I don't think adding unique naval properties is the key to balancing ships in Advanced Wars. I think it's more important to take a look at the units themselves and how to improve their already established roles, such as how some of them deal with air units. Now, speaking of air units, they are another reason why naval combat in Advanced Wars is almost never seen. Air units counter naval units too hard. While this is historically accurate, as many historical sea battles have been won due to one side having air superiority, this doesn't make for very good gameplay, so naval units in Advanced Wars really need an upgrade to their anti-aircraft guns. So, with all these problems outlined, I will now go through each of the naval units in Advanced Wars 1 and 2 and outline what I think should be changed about them. Let's begin small with the Thelander. Being a transport unit, the Thelander is essential for getting your units across the ocean, but it is also unique in that it can transport up to 2 vehicles. This is essential if you want to bring your tanks out to an island where there are no bases, but the Thelander's insane price of 12,000 makes it too steep of an investment for such a purpose. While a simple reduction in its cost is not a very exciting change, I do think it's the only way to fix the Thelander, so I propose halving its cost from 12,000 down to 6,000. It would still be quite an investment and more expensive than the other two transports, but it would now be a little less punishing to build in an actual game. Up next is the Cruiser, perhaps one of the least cost-effective units in the game. For a price of 18,000, the Cruiser acts as a counter to air units and submarines, but while it is great at the latter, it absolutely blows at the former, being hard countered by battlecopters and being utterly demolished by bombers. The cruiser has the ability to transport 2 copter units, which can be situationally useful, but it is rarely seen due to how expensive it is. For the cruiser, it really just needs to be more resistant to air units. Dual Strike actually already implemented this buff, so it's not really an original idea, but one that needs to be implemented nevertheless. Battlecopters really should not be able to inflict a lot of damage against cruisers at all. Bombers could leave a dent, but they should take heavy damage on their retaliation strike, similar to how they perform against anti-air. In fact, I just think cruisers should have similar performances compared to the anti-air unit, as they are essentially the anti-air of the sea. I also think their price should be bumped down from 18,000 to 14,000, as they are effectively a counter unit and thus they should be easier to deploy. On a side note, I would also greatly reduce the damage cruisers take from land units. I know it's hilarious to see a Neotank deal 5 HP of damage to a cruiser from a shoreline, but it also severely hampers the cruiser's usability whenever it is close to land. And then we have the Submarine. The Submarine is a stealth unit that hunts other naval units, and thus it is never built first unless there are already other ships on the field. As a result, they're probably the least deployed units in Advanced Wars, which is a shame, because they're actually really unique and I like them a lot. For example, I think it is hilarious how you can trap air units with them, but this is more a technical limitation of how Advanced Wars is played rather than a feature of the submarines. When addressing their problems, the price is obviously a big issue. 20,000 funds is just too much for a counter unit, so I think its cost should actually be sliced in half, down to 10,000. The amount of damage it deals is actually fine, I just think it's cost too much. I would like it to do a little bit more against landers though, as I think it's annoying how it's a coin toss whether they one-shot them or not. I think they should just deal a flat 100% damage against landers, so that landers out in the open will always be destroyed unless they're on terrain or if you have some kind of defense bonus. And then we come to the mighty Battleship, or as I like to call it, the glorified water rocket. Now, I don't say this with any kind of glee. I love building battleships in matches where my opponent isn't expecting them, and they can actually be very good in very specific circumstances. However, while they have one extra range over the rocket and a lot more survivability, their insane price tag of 28,000 funds makes them way too costly. However, I don't think merely reducing the battleship price is a clever way to balance them. I think they need some fundamental changes to their core kit. Now, while I would maybe reduce their price a little bit, down to 25,000, I would also give the battleship more tools to tackle threats. First of all, I think they should get defensive anti-aircraft guns, similar to how they worked in Super Famicom Wars. They shouldn't be able to attack with them, but they should fire back when air units attack them. However, these anti-aircraft guns should not do a lot of damage. It should just allow the battleship to defend itself against light threats like battlecopters. Bombers should still be a counter unit, forcing the player to rely on cruisers for support, but the battleship should not be countered by a unit worth 9,000. That is just pathetic. I would also reduce the damage battleships takes from submarines, not to the point where they won't be scared of them, but considering I already proposed to nerf submarine cost down to 10,000, I think you should need a couple of them to take down a battleship, so their damage should be roughly halved. Lastly, I would also increase the range of the battleship by 1, making them even more threatening to land units. If someone deploys a battleship onto the field, it should demand an immediate response. So those are all the naval units in Advanced Wars 2, and I certainly could make the argument for adding the black boat and carrier from Dual Strike, but I don't think it would really change up the naval game all that much. So I am instead going to propose something entirely different. A brand new unit called the Destroyer. This would be an all-purpose, cheap early-game naval unit that is similar to a tank at sea. It would be quite fast, having around 7 move, and also being an excellent scout with 6 vision, allowing it to gather intel on both land and sea units. The best part, however, is that it would be incredibly cheap, costing only around 8,000 funds to deploy, so it would be a reasonable unit to open up with in a naval game. The Destroyer would be capable of dealing light damage to other naval units, around 40%, but it would also be capable of attacking land units for around 50%, and around 20 to 30% against light vehicles, allowing it to actually pose a small threat to units situated close to the shoreline. It would also be able to attack air units and submarines, but it would not do as much damage as the cruiser. The destroyer would be absolutely crushed by enemy battleships and bombers, taking around 100% base damage, meaning it would not hold up well in naval warfare without proper support. These destroyers would fill a crucial role in the naval lineup, providing the players with a mobile, cheap scout capable of harassing enemy units. So, to quickly summarize, this is how I would balance naval combat in Advanced Wars. 1. Allow naval units to cross shoals and bridges. 2. Reduce the deployment cost of most ships. 3. Allow naval units to more effectively counter and fight air units. 4. Introduce the destroyer as an all-purpose early-game naval unit. So, do you agree or disagree with any of these changes? Or maybe you have some ideas of your own? Let me hear what you have to say about it in the comments section below. I would like to give a big shout out to Runso507. The idea of making a video balancing naval units was originally his, and he wrote the initial script as well, though I changed it up quite a bit. He has a YouTube channel and recently made a video about firepower versus defense, so you should check that out and give him a sub if you're interested. Anyway, my name is Mangs, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again very soon. Bye bye.